Well, we continue our coverage following the 8.9 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan. Now the after effects include not only aftershocks, but fears of a radioactive fallout after a Japanese nuclear power plant northeast of Tokyo is having some major issues. The radiation levels now 1,000 times normal levels. I want to go now to Columbus, Ohio, and speak to Harvey Wasserman. He's the author of Solartopia, Our Green-Powered Earth, AD 2030. Harvey, I know we spoke a few hours ago, but I wanted to get the latest. As the sun comes up in Japan and the radioactive levels get extremely high, can you tell us what's happening?
Well, and now, when last we talked, we were talking about one reactor. Now it seems like there are as many as 3 reactors that are under stress in Japan in the wake of this earthquake and tsunami. The radiation levels at one of the Fukushima reactors, one we've been talking about, have risen, as you said, seem to be 1,000 times higher than normal outside the reactor. This is a very, very troubling sign. They may not have the capability of cooling this reactor. They've admitted that what appears to be the case is that the batteries and even the backup generators are not working. And if that's the case, then they're going to have to flood the reactor core. And if they do that, it's highly likely there'll be major radiation releases. I've seen also in some of the reports indications that the pressure inside the containment is twice the design capability. Now, that means that the only way they can prevent the containment from blowing is to release radiation outside the stacks. That means that the gases are going to go out, radiation is going to go out. That's why they're evacuating people. 3,000 people is a lot of people to evacuate, especially in a situation where the country is already under extreme stress. So this is a serious situation.
You know, we've been monitoring this situation throughout the day, and it seems that things are changing. They're developing. You know, this radiation levels at 1,000 times normal. That's somewhat new in the last few hours. Different things change, and it seems from, you know, what I read, it takes hours for each new step to happen. When will we know if this is, you know, horrible and apocalyptic, as you have said in the past, or if this is fixable? How long will this take?
We don't know. That's part of the problem. It's all an uncertainty. The other situation is we could well have another either another aftershock or another quake. It's very common that happens, especially on an earthquake of this magnitude. 8.9 is close to being off scale, and there actually apparently was a separate earthquake that occurred in northern Japan within the last 24 hours. You also have to remember this is the second time in 4 years that 6 or more Japanese reactors have been shut down because of an earthquake. One of the really worrisome things is that the 8.9 shock may have weakened all of the reactors. And if that's weakened the reactors, then an aftershock or another earthquake could do substantially more damage. This plant, by the way, is 40 years old. It's a very old reactor, and that's a double-edged sword because, number one, it means it's weaker structurally, and number two, there's more radiation inside the reactor because it's accumulated over 40 years. This is about a worst-case scenario, and we are just hoping that they can put in new batteries, and then we don't know if they can get off-site power. The question is it going to be sufficient to keep this plant from melting? Because if it does melt, the pressure will build up, and it could really do some significant damage.
It's so interesting that you say that the age of these plants, because I know in a lot of what I've been reading, they say Japan, the country as a whole, really avoided a lot of damage because the buildings there are so up to code. But when you talk about these nuclear stations, I guess it's a different story. 40 years, probably a lot of things have not been updated. I want to know what you think about the strategy used so far in this response. I know
there's only one strategy. There's only one strategy, and that is to pump water and keep this thing cool. And if they can't keep it cool, then they're going to have to dump water in there, and then you're really taking your chances because you don't know what's going to happen. Because in an older reactor, we have something called embrittlement. That means that the metal in the reactor has been bombarded for 40 years now with extremely hot water and with radiation. And one of the issues we've dealt with here in the United States on older reactors is there's a fear that if you have an accident and you have to dump in water in the emergency core cooling system, If it hits embrittled metal, the metal will shatter. And if the metal shatters inside this reactor, we've got then you're talking a potentially apocalyptic situation. You don't even have to breach the containment because the radiation will go out the stacks. There's no way to keep that from happening.
Well, that's what I also wanted you to talk a little bit more about. Certainly this is, radiation 101 for a lot of us, trying to put all these pieces together and figure out how this all works. But, one of our guests talked about containment methods that should usually be used in this situation, and yet we're seeing instead this steam, potentially radioactive steam, being released into the air. Why released into the air as opposed to, using these containment methods?
Because the containment's not strong enough to contain the pressure inside what's going on there. So in order to alleviate some of the pressure, they're trying to do a controlled release. This was also done at 3 Mile Island. The pressure inside is just too great. I would bet there's probably a hydrogen bubble in there as well. And hydrogen is extremely dangerous if it's concentrated because it can explode. This being an old General Electric reactor, those containments are very, very weak, much weaker than was present at Chernobyl. And we could have a worst-case scenario if the pressure builds up, if they can't release the pressure fast enough, and it breaches containment, then it's all going to come out. And then we've got, and since it's an old reactor, there's a lot of residual radiation in there.
And Harvey, I got to bring it up. You just brought it up. I think the question is on a lot of people's minds tonight. This year, we're coming up on the 25th anniversary of that disaster at Chernobyl. A lot of people seeing quite a bit of similarities here. Certainly that disaster in the Ukraine. So many after effects being felt today that will be felt for lifetimes to come. Can you see a connection? Is there a possibility that what's happening here in Japan could be very similar to that?
Well, the study that's come out in the last year has shown that 985,000 people were likely killed by Chernobyl. And that Chernobyl happened in a remote area, a rural area, a relatively poor area of Ukraine. This isn't Japan, for God's sakes. There's over 100 million people living in an area the size of California, and it's even more concentrated because people live along the coasts. The death toll, God forbid, from a major accident at Fukushima reactor would far exceed what happened at Chernobyl, almost without a doubt. And of course it would wipe out an area, make it uninhabitable that is tremendously valuable.
Wait, I got to interrupt you, Harvey. You just said that what's happening here could far exceed what happened at Chernobyl?
Yes, because of the concentration of people. You have way more people in the area around Fukushima and the other Japanese reactors than you did at Chernobyl. Chernobyl, the closest city was 80 kilometers, was Kiev, and lots of damage was done. But there are people all around this reactor at Fukushima, just like in California. The 4 reactors at San Onofre and Diablo Canyon, they're not remote anymore. There are suburbs all over there. Diablo Canyon is 10 miles from San Luis Obispo. This is much more dangerous in terms of human life than Chernobyl was.
And certainly when you
it's hard to comprehend, but I'm afraid it's true.
I know I did see a quote today from someone with the U.S. Geological Survey. It said that the energy radiated by this quake is nearly equal to 1 month's worth of energy consumption in the United States. Certainly puts it in perspective for you. Harvey Wasserman, author of Solartopia, Our Green-Powered Earth, AD 2030.